Rise again to another day, to another life in another cage. The church bells ring and call your name, lured into the fire like a moth to a flame. Catch a light and see the skies ablaze. We kept it lit during the darkest days. The winter came and claimed our mates, but we survived and praised the brave. Returned to grace, cast down our ropes and blades. The battle is over the top, so make a change. Stand up and be counted for in this game. Negativity will be slain and replaced with a plus. This is how we walk, and every step is moving us up. Follow the lights and rise above. The ceiling cracked with light and love. Feel this 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 light and love.
Heading towards the sound of horns, we've grown so sore from hearts now torn, bottled in a storm. This is unlike before, but we march forward. Born from the barrel of a gun, shoot the feeling in the sun. Who will soldier on and who will die young? Fathers like their sons, but who has the problems? Are there solutions? Stability then ruin. There's a weight upon our chest that also weighs upon our heads. Master stress with cigarettes. Live today like you were dead, but pay respects to the friends that passed you by and made amends. A white rose in a flower bed. Soldier on until the end.
And good evening, and welcome to another edition of Life is People. Well, tonight it's my great honour and privilege to have Satori back. So before we go any further tonight, how are you doing, my brother?
Oh, I'm doing good. It's 24-hour Imaginarium, so that's always
exactly.
good.
Exactly. So before we go any further, I mean, what the track we started off there was "March Forward" by the Ceiling Demons, and that's their new track, which is a bit of an allude to their new album, which I don't want to sort of say anymore, but you know, work in progress. So again, please find them on SoundCloud. I'll put the links out. But that's a kind of lead into really kind of where we want to talk tonight. So before we go any further, dude, let's start off. So let's take it from people who maybe listen to this and don't know anything about you know, where we're coming from. Just give people an overview of what Infinite Imaginarium is and what the 24-hour Infinite Imaginarium is all about.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm Satori D, and I'm part of Infinite Imaginarium. And what Infinite Imaginarium is, it's a lot of different things, but really simply, it's a creative workspace, virtual workspace, to dream up dreams and then go about implementing them, making them real. So whatever your idea is, whatever creativity you want to express, you do it. So what we use it for right now basically is to do our podcast and to do our videos. And we want to do a documentary in the near future. And we have a web series that we're developing and we want to do. And so far, that's what it's being used for. We use Lumio and Minds, and hopefully in the near future too, we could combine that. And so it'll be a more user-friendly as you go into one place to do everything. And yeah, that's what we're working towards. Well, and that's just to be more creative collaboratively to do social media, I guess, but also to using it to tell stories and express art. And what I like to say is media for inspiration, transformation, and manifestation, and not just for entertainment, corporations, and monetization. So that's the way we look at it.
Well, this ties perfectly into the kind of the theme I really wanted to sort of just, kind of discuss with you, really, because we've had previous discussions, and I want to discuss tonight was really. Now, I think you can maybe I'll throw the question over to you straight away. We can start with this point. What between what would you describe as creativity? I mean, I think you described the maybe some of the um, outcomings of creativity, about how it can manifest change and all those kind of things, which I want to go on to discuss later on. But just start with the brief block one. What would you actually, if someone, an alien was to land on this planet and they asked you, what does creativity mean? What does it? What is it? How would you describe it in a most sort of concise way or erudite way you could to someone who's never even been to this planet before?
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's to create something, anything really. Um, and hopefully, when it gets towards the creativity, towards the art side of creating things, that it's expressing um, the essence of whatever it is you want to express. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah,
I can.
I think
Yeah,
that's as simply as it could be, I guess, in my opinion.
yeah,
Um,
I would concur. No,
and
I would concur with that, and I might. Sorry, go on.
no, and I remember this one time. This was like in college. I had this just this discussion with my girlfriend, and I was saying, "Oh yeah, everything is an artist," and she's like, "No, not everything's an artist." She's like, "What about a plant?" Yeah, they're an art of making oxygen. Like they're expressing their true being by making oxygen. Like whatever it is that you are meant to do, that's what you do. And if you do something like long enough, it becomes like an art form. Like whether it's making a meal or doing your job or whatever it is, like and when you're in that state, is you're not thinking, you're actually just being and doing, and it goes effortlessly and it flows with whatever motion is at that time. So like for instance, when things are going really good in the kitchen, like no one's talking, we're just all moving and going at the pace that we're supposed to go, and there's no talking, everybody's just doing, and you're like dancing in the kitchen, like because there's people running in and out, and you're not hitting each other, but no one's like, "Oh, stop," or no, like you're just doing, and you're moving, and you're aware of your environment, and whatever that is, we all get into those different.
Can you hear me? You broke up a bit there at the end, sorry, but I caught the drift of what you're saying, and I would have to
Oh,
completely concur with you. I think, as I said, I completely concur with you. I would, I think, in the short way I would put it is it's a manifestation of our intent as as human beings, or anything in nature, and that's the point. Creativity goes across nature, as you said, as you quite eruditely said. It's across everything. So but then, now we kind of like broadly put into creativity. I think the next step that leads on from that is, can everybody be creative? Now, to be honest, my friend, I've gone up and down and swung around, and this has been a long time thought process for me for many, many years. I've gone from being, yes, everything's creative. The act of life itself is one creative act, and all human beings we all can express perfect creativity. We were all given the chance. And then on the other hand, there's the whole point of like, no, it's the creative path is a really hard path, and there's a number of reasons which I can allude to why I think I'm more tending to now think it's not for everybody. I think it's to be creative is a not only is it objectively seen in nature. If everyone was if everybody was creative, then how come everybody isn't creative? And I've been in situations, and and all different situations, and the argument's going to be, well, people are only, you give them more resources and you give them more, you take them out of a situation. I've known people with loads and loads of money who have no no strides, no pressures at all, and they're not creative. And I know people who've had no money, and they're the most creative people in the world. So I don't think it's to do with resources. I don't think it's to do with time. I think there's a certain elements about what it is to be creative. But the point generally is I don't think everybody would be creative. Now, before we take that any further, what are your thoughts on that? Are you whereabouts on that spectrum do you think? Do you think everybody, given the right circumstances, would be creative, or it's only a very, very select few, or are you somewhere in the middle of that spectrum?
So I'm gonna give kind of a weird answer, and hopefully it sheds better light on the problem. But anyways, I think there are ideas, and certain ideas have their own momentum and energy and vibration, and sometimes they're really deep but very small, or they're just different ways, but it's the ideas that attract the certain different people, and if it's time, then it could create and it could explode like crazy, and people are just going to do it without thinking about it. And so this is thinking about ideas in like mimetic terms, and I think everybody has a role to play in it. And so whatever your role is if it's funding it, you know, all great expressions or creativity comes from like this moment where I expressed it as that I'm just the pen. Like I wasn't really writing it. I was like receiving it, and I was just writing it down. So it was like just like this thought or idea that came to me. I know how to express it. And as the environment of our society is right now, it's very hard to sustain that kind of pure creativity, I guess. It's really hard to even get to that point, but to express it. But it's weird. It's like that old Zen stuff, like you finally learn like it's just being, like you kind of like wake up, someone slaps you in the face, and you're like, oh shit, okay, I get it. It's just being focused on the whatever's right now. And yeah, so and along about in a roundabout way, that's my answer to.
Yes, I think you're right, because this is I think this is where the next obvious step goes towards, because it's what is this creative thing, and this is where I say this is a question that many before us, my friend, have pondered for many times, and it is that what is creativity. And that's the point. As much as it's manifest from us as humans or us as people or whatever, it is, as you said, it's almost this ethereal idea. It's a wave. It's something that. This is why I say I think it's more. Not many people can, find a way to sort of get themselves into it, because it's a state of mind. For instance, you find many people who are leaders of corporations or governments or head of big power structures. They're the least creative in general terms, because they don't understand that, because their whole mind, their whole synapses in their brains are used to fulfill their certain things they need to get to the top of power structures. And that's why the creative people are always called for by these people. I mean, it's no excuse that the military and corporations and throughout time in history, all the leaders of the world are always called creative people. I mean, go right back to the Sumerians, and they're calling out creative people to build big statues for the future. I mean, these people at one end of the spectrum don't have the creativity. And that's what I'm saying, because it is to go down the line to find that creative moment, like you say, that flow you talk about in the kitchen or wherever it may be, that flow moment, you've got to be in a certain state of mind. And that's a difficult path to go down. That's why I say I don't think it's for everybody, because I think it's a very difficult path to go down, because it's a very hard path to go down. As you know, you're walking into a world where you're trying to strive to find this stuff. So you've got to be open-minded, and all the things that we discussed before about that state of mind you've got to be in, an open, that flow state. And even when you do create something, then it's a really difficult point, because you think, okay, I've got to put my head above it's the tall poppy syndrome. The minute you put your head above the crowd, or you separate yourself from the crowd and the herd mentality, you're obviously left in that alone situation, which all your fears of the human body and how we've been brought up makes you fearful. So it's a difficult path. And that's why I think it is. But it's searching, as you said, that elusive vibration of what creativity is. And I think with that is that's why I say it's not for everybody, because I think it's a very, to have that open state and all that. There's a lot of things that need to go into place, or you have to, like I said, maybe you have to understand that I think a lot of creativity comes from struggle and strife and having that resistance. And a lot of people don't want that. I mean, from both ends, you may have someone who be very, very rich and they're like, I don't want to go out and suffer the world just so I can be creative. I've got everything I desire. And you have people who are the other way around and have no resources and say, well, I don't have to be creative because I have everything I have in my need. And it's all about that resistance. That's why I say that even people from, it's, in any circumstance you can do it. It's still to search for that vibration, that flow. It's one of the things I think many creative, I think it's a curse that many creative people have, from the artists to musicians all throughout history and time. It's been the thing that, we're either striving for it to find that moment, and when we have it, we try to let it all flow through us, and when it's gone from us, we're trying everything to get that moment back. So it becomes a dialectic that can lead a lot of human beings, a lot of creative people, my friend, to suicide and death. So that in itself that's why I don't recommend it for everybody, because it's a very, like I say, if it was, it's alluding it to the life of a samurai warrior. That's not the life for everybody. It takes discipline and all the steps along it, and you can't. It's almost cruel to sort of say to everybody, oh yeah, you can all just be this and you can all be that, because, as you know, my friend, I mean, I think one of the things that, as I said, one of the greatest curses of being creative is when you're not in that creative flow, and understanding how you deal with your everyday life when you're not in that flow, because it's such a, as you said, it's almost the ultimate thing that you can have. You all this stuff is flowing through you in this moment. Your mind and everything's just concentrating into manifesting this thing that you've got inside you and trying to put it in a physical form or a musical form or any, shaping it into something. And that moment passes, and then you're left with this void. Let's be truthful about it. It's one of the things that people, to be truthful about the creative, as much as it's really great, is there is a downside to it. And when you're not in that creative flow, it can drive certain personalities. That's why it's a difficult thing, because certain personalities, they crave for it, and then it becomes really hard to start chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Again, let's hear your thoughts.
For sure. The Dark Night of the Soul. It's funny. One of our best videos, or my best video that I've done, that has done well, I guess, in a sense, is something that I got from Alan Watts on Carl Jung and the Dark Night of the Soul. And so, we also did a show on that, Being the Light in the Dark. And actually, our web series is going to be called, I think right now, Luminous Dark Tales. And it's about being the luminous dark. And so this is that void, that moment before the supernova of creation. It's that void of nothing, when in the darkness, because when in the darkness, that's when the light comes out, and the light is the creative force, or whatever it is. And it usually goes off like a supernova. And so you just, I don't know, for me individually, it's about looking at it as being a surfer, I guess. And you got to be able to handle the waves, and hopefully you don't come onto shore crashed, like you crashed on this shore. Like, hopefully you come on with your own will and own power. But the other hard part after those creative sessions or whatever is when you come back onto shore. And it's what I'm finding, my process right now currently is in implementing it, being the change, or whatever, being whatever it is for each individual, and just being and acting it, protest as a way of being, or art as a way of being, and your actual everyday moment being is that performance art, or is that protest that you want to see in the world, and vice versa. That's why I think the Infinite Imaginarium is important, because right now what I want it to be is a virtual creative workspace that has these practical tools that you could do about making decisions creatively and collaboratively. And so what I just do is I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I just lead by example. Like I know there's things that I want to do, and if anybody wants to go on and help do that, they can. And we make decisions as whatever it is for that video, music, digital arts, whatever it is that you want to do. There's a way to do it, and vice versa. There's this other thing called Open Collective, and it's a way a group can get funding without actually being an actual legal entity group. So it's just for collectives, just people that get together and want to execute an idea. Say it's an idea on a podcast for whatever it is, and you want to do that, but you don't want to like make yourself an entity, but you want to make decisions and you want to be able to get funds in. From what I know, Open Collective is a platform that helps you do that. So things like that are good to know. And then I think you just naturally start becoming that, and other people will follow into that habit that resonate with that idea, and things would organically just happen. But in the beginning, you have to sing your song kind of loud to see if there's any echoes that come back. And I like to view things as like that. I know that's not a direct answer, but it gives you hopefully a picture of what I'm talking about.
No, absolutely, I completely concur. Well, before we go any further, I take it, is that you, Nikki? Who's joined us?
Oh no, this is Missy. She's another Infinite
Oh,
Imaginarium person.
I was just
Oh
saying,
no,
I was just trying to say
yeah,
hello.
for sure.
Hi,
Hello. Hi. I finally,
Hi.
I was having technical difficulties. I finally logged in on a different device and it's working. So I'm a bit
Well,
late, but I just wanted to say hello.
well, no, I'll just give you a brief sort of overview. We're basically
Thank
just talking,
you.
we've just been generally just talking about what creativity is. It's like, like I gave the example if an alien landed, how we would all describe what creativity is, and then we kind of led that on to what the state of creativity is, and that it's very kind of ethereal, and how to get into that flow state, and then we kind of led into what can everybody be creative, and we just basically just finishing that discussion about whether everybody can be creative, and the hard path that you need to go down, or the easy path, or the state of mind you need to get into to be creative. Which one of the things I just want to lead on to you just quickly while you're on this point, Satori, because I think this leads to the next sort of point of when you do like this creative point, when you have got to all the steps we've just gone through, and you have got to the creative moment, and you, whatever that moment, whether it's music, art, piece of food, whatever that creative moment will be, there you are, you've created it. Then it becomes another great decision and another great sort of crossroads or spectrum or Mandelbrot or whatever way you want to look at it, that the artist's faces exist. What do you do with that seed of creation you've done? Do you hold it? Do you test it out in the world? And there's so many variables that play into place. For instance, a band, they go out and they play it, they have a piece of music and they take it out into the crowd. There's so many traps along that way for the creative person, because the band goes out, they play a track, they go out there, it gets liked, and they think, oh, okay. And then there's a very easy tendency this to become like, okay, I'll just put the same thing out again, and I'll get bigger crowds, and I get more crowds, and I get more of this, and I get more of this, and before you know it, you the seed of that creation, you just become lazy in it. You're just producing the same thing, and you're not becoming creative. And you, as a human being, you know it inside yourself. You know it like, oh, once I was creative, and you can see this reflected in so many bands. That's why they do one. It's the old adage that used to be like the first album was always the great album. The second album was like, oh, let's see if they can follow up the first album. And then by the third album, we knew they were going to be great. And then usually the fourth album was rubbish, because they either follow the same pattern, and they always want to just almost stay on the same level. And by the sixth, seventh album, they're trying to, oh, let's go back and make what we did back in the day, And it's, so we've seen this pattern. And I'm just giving examples of how this can work with music. You can see the same with art, film, any creative, any venture. So it's a difficult person when you have got that creative. You see, okay, what do I do with it? Like I say, do I take it to the crowd? And then when you take it to the crowd, the other danger you can be doing. And this is the other thing that I wanted to tap into what you said about the collective, and it is right, because there is this great thing we've got at the moment where we can connect human beings, and you know how much I'm for that, and I think all the time we're talking and connecting, that's a great thing. But one of the things about when you go to out to the crowd is it can very easily become an open dialectic. So for instance, I'll give the band example. The band goes out there and then they start just talking about things, and the crowd cheer them all, and then it just becomes an open dialectic between the crowd, not even subconsciously, and before you know it, it's getting ratchet up, and all the great promises are made, and this is that, and the power goes to these people, and ego gets filled up, and this whole environment builds up. And I mean, the extremes of this is what we saw with the rise of the Nazis, and you see this over and over and over again, where these cults has to rise, where this open dialectic between the crowd and neither side want to do it. I mean, it just happens, and all you need is to pull one demon out, and all the other demons come out, and before we know, we're marching people into death camps. So that is a very difficult thing for creative people to fight against. It's one of the things that, again, the resistance we have to fight against, of not just listening to the mob and going with the crowd. Now, I know a load of bands, and I think it's one of the great things about the markers of the age we're in right now. I know many bands who, as much as the options are there to go out and crowdfund their music, aren't doing it because they say, no, I don't want to be beholden to the crowd. I'd rather build it from the step by step and trying to go out and play gigs small by one, rather than just crowdfunding it, getting 50 grand, but then everybody's wanting and almost subconsciously dictating what we do. So again, these are I wanted to allude to these because I think these are the unspoken steps on that creative people will always find. And I'm only speaking for myself. These are steps I've come along, and it's how to, that's why we'd have this discussion. What actions and thoughts have you had when you've been at these steps, and then to spread these on, because I think that's half the point of what we're discussing with the whole day of the 24 hour. It's just, instead of just holding these secrets to ourselves, when we've been at these steps and these processes, let's illuminate people so they can not waste energy and time going down paths that we went down that were wasteful. So that's my, please. Anyway, I'll throw that over to you two. Your thoughts on that, and then please.
I would love to say something about that. I actually love what I read about. I think it was maybe even Joseph Campbell, maybe part of The Power of Myth or The Hero's Journey, where taking the path that's not traveled, and in order for the path really to open for you, like for the hero, initially you need to take the leap of faith, and the universal doors open and support that attempt and an initiative, and it from there is that ripple effect, I think, like Satori was just mentioning, throwing something out there, waiting for that echo, seeing what happens. It's a matter really of creating, like you maybe were just saying, a path that's not already followed. But people have been making paths and saying, oh, follow that clear path, but don't follow the clear path. Please don't follow the clear path. Please make your own path. I think that's really I find when I've been asking lately with people, well, what do we do with creativity? I think the Imaginarium posted something about it. It was a quote, and I responded with a Zen garden picture, and I said, that my garden grows with a little bit of more gray hair each and every day, but with a lot more care and a lot of love. And I think just that cultivation of whatever you find is a seed worth protecting and planting, and finding a place to do that and give it expression or life. Yeah, it's becoming harder with our environment. I do believe that's true, and scary for artists, as you said. I think that's the battle right there, is finding the place and peace to cultivate. And where do we do that? And the Imaginarium is great because it's kind of a virtual place to, have the ability to do it. I'm constantly moving around, mobile, and it makes it so like I have a place to contribute and keep going. And that's nice. That's a nice path. It's a virtual path. It's hopefully going to be there for people to tap into, and I would love if it could be an ongoing thing for people. So there you go.
Yeah, definitely, because I think too, it's an issue of environment. So we're talking about seeds, right? And so in a healthy environment, I like to think of the ecology of ideas. And so in a healthy environment, good seeds will grow and they'll grow big and they grow into like trees and they'll last forever. Um, but in a healthy environment, that's when all of the death and decay and bad ideas grow. Um, so currently, let's say in mainstream media, we have a bad environment, and so that's where bad ideas grow. I like to joke and say, yeah, mainstream media, that's where good ideas go to die. And I was having this conversation with one of my friends, and
That's great because I call it Hollywood, like instead of
yeah,
Hollywood, Hollywood.
and and we were talking, and he was saying something about this MSNBC news clip, and I guess they're covering Pep and Keck, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's when you know that idea has died. When because then like later he said something about, oh, this is a new word I'm using. It's like you could use it, but I'll tell you when to stop using it. I was like, yeah, when it hits MSNBC, because that's where good ideas go to die. And so like once it's known there, that's when everybody else has to move on to a different idea.
Well, dude, my kind of one to that would be, you know, maybe you know, my retort to that would be, it's almost a play on words, but it's like I always see the mainstream media as is where dead ideas go to live.
That's like the complementary piece to what I'm saying, you know.
Exactly it, because that's the point of it. But and I think you're right, because I think this is what Melissa was, you know, we're all, you know, the whole point which we're discussing is, and I would concur with you. And I think one of the great things about, you know, just bringing this back to what you said about places like the Imaginarium, you know, just general what are building up. I think creative people, like, goes back to what you were saying so eruditely, Missy, was about where we, you know, began this conversation with. Ultimately, creativity is that individualistic thing. It's from inside yourself, you know, and that's, to me, you mentioned about, you know, places like where we can meet and encourage each other. That is great, because we've seen this throughout history, and I allude to the Enlightenment over here that we saw in my part of the world over here. One of the things that drove the Enlightenment period of, you know, just a few, you know, blink of time ago, was just the idea where scientists and people with philosophy and artists and musicians and the blacksmith and everyone were just met in a town hall and had these kind of discussions. And it was amazing, just having just a place where you can just meet, and how much of, you know, boom, and the enlightenment of Europe happened through this. And I think this is where we are now. So I was saying to you before we went live, yeah, Satori, I think we're at a tipping point. And I think this, again, this tips alludes really to what you were saying, Missy, because I think you're right. This, you hit the nail on the head perfectly when you said it. Fear. It's that fear that artists have. Now, I don't think it's right to say to people anyway, we shouldn't be fearful, because there are things to be fearful. Because one of the things that I think, there's two things, and I think both these points I want to hear your points on. I think we've got every right to be fearful because of what I was just alluding to earlier on, Satori, was the fact that people in power structures, they don't want creativity because it is individualistic, and they love the idea of us all in herds, and because herds are easy to control. I mean, again, history's piled with it, man. I mean, you know, Russia, China, you know, nobody liked creativity. The first thing that, you know, I mean, I lived down in Argentina. The first thing that any military dictatorship happens is they go after the creative people, because they don't want people spreading the idea of individualistic, and I can like what I like, and I can dress the way I like, and I can think the way I like, because that ultimate thought process, I can think how I like and express it. That's the ultimate. This is what I'm trying to say to you. It is a fear, but this is the real kind of nuts of where I wanted this conversation to really get to. I think instead of it being a fear, I think it's the greatest thing in this universe. And I think you and Luke, we discussed it earlier on, story, but it is the greatest thing we've got. And that's why governments and corporations and everybody fear it. And it is such a force. And this is why I think it is right to be not just unfearful about it, because I'm aware that there's so many people in this world who will use that force of creativity and this force for bad things, dude. I mean, creativity can be used in a negative way. I mean, there's people being creative. I mean, let's be real. There's been people being creative on how they're destroying human beings. It's nothing. It repels me with every ounce of my soul and my being. But they're creative elements, and so creativity isn't just a force for the good. It can be used for the negative, side. And I think that's what artists and true creative people fear the most, because we're not generally the kind of people who want power and we don't want to have control over. And the people who use it for negative things, they have that whole mindset of power, great, and I can be creative, and then I can use those creative means to control how I want to control people. So I think that's my thought process on what you're saying, Missy, about the fear. I think that is the fear inside us. But I think in all of us about being creative. But I think it's time, and I was saying to you before we went live, so sorry. I think we haven't got time anymore to stand. I think we've got to stand up and go, hey, instead of being fearful about it, it's our privilege, it's our honor. We're at a time in history, and you were alluding to it, Missy, that we can connect with people that us three have never met in each other, but we can inspire each other, talk to each other, and we can shape. And this is the thing about the thing that I don't think any of us creators have really understood. We've got more power in our hands than any corporation, government, or anything else, because we can shape everything. It's all about narrative. And that's one of the great things that creative people generally, particularly what I talk about, the music and the arts and stuff like this, man, we have the ability to shape so much. And we shouldn't be fearful. Like, we should just be going, right, okay, look, it's our honor. We're that privileged in that time in our lives where we can do it. And as you said before, this isn't just taking on big world dreams and trying to, solve everything else. It's as you absolutely eruditely said it spot on. It's about the little ideas. It's like the little steps along the way, and everybody can contribute if they're individually putting their, seeking that creativity, what we talked about. And that's the great moment we're in. And that's why I think, as I say, that's what I love inspires me about days like today, because it's kind of like, if we all focus our energy, and actually, if we could actually understand that, and understand how much we could leash on this world, and how much we could really shape and change things, and just by being ourselves. And I think one of the things that goes to the end of this, I think to this whole point, I think we shouldn't be afraid of it. I think we should approach it. I think we should do it, in a truthful selves, in a truthful manner. When we are creative, we should be truthful about it. And I think just above all, just realize that, it kind of goes back to what I started, with a message to you when I sent to you in that, the theme of this conversation. Annihilation happens as we watch. And we can't afford to be passive anymore. And that's what I love about creative people. We are the ones that are, we're not passive. We're not just the herd. We are the ones that are brave enough. That's a call I put out to everybody now. Look, we're all here. We're brave enough to stand up in a public, conversation. And we've already got that fortitude inside us. And I think it's just a case of understanding that it's not something we should be fearful. It's something we should grasp with both our hands and see what happens. And because bottom line of it, and this is bringing it right down to human level, I've lost 3 or 4 people in the last year since I spoke to you, my friend. And I'm like, no, it's no more of this, I'm too hiding in the bush, or I don't want to do this. We've all got to step up, because the worst thing in life is to get to the end of that point, which we don't know what's going to happen, and to think, oh, I didn't do this. Go to any survey, read it. It's an objective fact. You read anybody who talks about their deathbed. There's a great book out, and I'll put a link on, and it's people's deathbed, confessions. And 90% of it's like what they didn't do, not what they didn't. People don't regret what they said. They regret what they don't do, and that's the truth of life. And that's what I think it's important to say, because I think that defeats any fear we may have about anything. Because you think, well, hey, it's just a short little time we've got, so what have we really got to be fearful for? But we have to respect. And I think that's the element of what you were quite rightly saying, Missy. There is a fear, but it's not maybe a fear, it's a respectful fear. But we should equally grab that and run with it. Sorry, I've been very passionate about this, so I'm going to throw it over to you two and see what you just think of that.
So I like to share something. So this is kind of a mashup of different things Allen Ginsberg has said, and I think it really goes to this point. And so anyways, he says, it isn't enough of your heart to break, because everybody's heart is broken now. Concentrate on what you want to say to yourself and your friends. Follow your inner moonlight. Don't hide the madness. Say what you want to say and don't care who's listening. Poetry is not the expression of party line. It's that the time of night lying in bed thinking what you really think and making private world public. That's what poetry does. So, for instance, I've been interested in this thing, and it kind of goes into that thinking what you really think and expressing what you really want to express. And the other part is making the private world public. That it could be done in a way that it could be heard, but also to in a way that is really not talking about what you say on the surface, but is really maybe hitting an archetype or resonating on a deeper level. And these bigger ideas have a way of organically moving. And I think that it's both, which is really hard for different people to view, and not everybody needs to view it in this way, but there's both a simultaneous thing of this non-duality of both will your own eternal will, and the, let's say, the heartbeat of the universe, because it doesn't matter what you and me do, things are going to turn as they turn in the galaxy. So there's our individual will, and hopefully that it contacts to these greater, deeper ideas that are more eternal, that have always been around. And I think that's when you follow your inner moonlight and you don't hide the madness. And hopefully, we could create a virtual environment where that's a healthy environment so different seeds could grow. Also, too, with the plan of having physical environments where the same thing can happen. And yeah, because I think all of life can be be as in the ecology of ideas, but the seasons of creativity. And as what you were talking about earlier, there is a growing period, like in spring, where new ideas are sprouting, and in summer they get really high and big, and then comes fall and it kind of dies down, and then comes winter and there's nothing. We are slaves to these rhythms of the whole world. I think if we understand them better, and we're very habitual people, like we're routine oriented. So if we're more in tune with the bigger routines of the world, I think that helps with the flow, because it's naturally going to go this process. And if you have an environment that is, let's say, and this is something I was thinking about earlier, really there should be 4 different holidays of sustaining creativity. And one is when it's new formed, and then the second, basically spring, summer, fall, winter. And all cultures have done this. If you look, at what Missy was saying about Joseph Campbell, some form or another, they express this idea, and that everything starts, really big, and then it goes into this growth period where it's too big, and then it falls and it kind of mellows down, and then it's the death period where there's nothing. And I think if you could have an environment where it helps with that process is important, because as you were saying, I think eventually, hopefully, that we're doing enough projects that are worthy of people's attention, and that we could convey that into a bigger environment where we're actually kind of funding the arts through an organic, collective way. And so where your physical being of your own expression is at least funded to meet your necessities, and very basic necessities, to eat and somewhere to sleep. And if we could do that, at the very least, I think we could help facilitate more healthy ideas and creativity. Talking about, as one time I had this conversation with Douglas Rushkoff, and he was saying, what they study for mass media are the true dark arts. And then so this, my own evil master plan are the white arts, where it's to unprogram you, to help facilitate this deeper meaning of oneness, and what I phrase as the songs of eternity, and to the heartbeat of the universe.
That's so beautiful. Can I respond to a couple of things both of you said? I just want to tie in, like, you spoke of, I mean, you brought up the deathbed. You're bringing up seeds of creativity. I have to bring up the fact, so Tori knows this. In the past, let's see, since March, I would say I ended up in the ER about 3 times, and I felt like I was in that place. And I'm only 40. So to be like feeling that way, I was left with those seeds in my mind and in my lap of creativity. Like, am I going to put these somewhere? What am I going to do with these? If I make it out of here, what am I going to do? And it was a struggle. And I had actually, Satori was a great, I feel like almost like a gift, a universal gift. He actually was a constant reminder of, well, if you have something you want to contribute, here's a place, And I spoke to a few of the Imaginariums happened the same day I got out of the ER, as a matter of fact. And again, speaking of those seeds and planting them in the right environment, and that environment, I mean, when you talk about the destruction and process, the destruction and rebirth kind of cycle, like, I just think of the wheel of life and the turning, and you're like caught in this cycle. As you said, you have plans and you have, these seeds, and you want to do these projects, and you're like, but how do I do that and what I'm dealing with all at the same time? And for me, it's been a struggle. And I do think that if you're brought close to your deathbed, and I was very prematurely, I feel like it was a direct portal. I was literally pushed right through to the dark city, just through all the way and out the other end. And I felt like I survived, and I was hanging around immediately with elderly people, and we were all relating and communicating about surviving and having struggled and lived, and they were all artists. And I bonded with them. I went from the ER, left that day, went to the cafe, hung out with these old dudes. What's up, Cranky? I just want to say what's up to Cranky. And, they actually were a gift to me, because they were what I didn't receive out the ER, which was this environment we're talking about, which you need a creative to be in the right type of atmosphere. Speaking of which, hello. We have another one in the atmosphere.
Hi, Nikki.
Let's say hello to Nikki.
Hi, Nikki.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. How are you?
Hi,
tonight?
Tim. How are you?
Oh, we're to want of a better word, we're balls deep in a conversation about creativity.
I know. I couldn't quite make it at the beginning point, unfortunately. I was tied up doing things, but I just caught this part of the conversation. I thought I'd join in at this point, so I don't know how much longer it's going on for, but
No, I can just give you a brief overview. We just kind of gone over basically what is creativity, what's the element of being creative. But I think the where we just led to, and we kind of just sort of saying about the power of what actual is, just let's take on a human level. Us as human beings have got this ability inside of us to manifest our intent, get this and put it out in a form, whether it's music, art, whatever. That's a very, very powerful tool. And you can argue it can bring down governments, corporations, it can change everything. So we were just literally, Miss was just saying about how, when it's trying to, like we're doing now, connect these people. And this goes to the conversation that I've had with you, Nikki, I've had with you, Satori, and I think it's just generally, it's how do we get this? And I always say hashtag herding all the cats together, because by nature, us creatives, we're all individualistic, and we understand that collaboration thing, because it goes into what you're just saying then, Satori. We by nature being creative, we're walking that line between chaos and order, and as you said, it's a very individualistic, lonely path, but we want to collaborate and we want to do that. So the question is, how do we, and I was saying before we went live, and I'm happy to say this online now, I'm sure we all have the same conversations over and over again with some people, but you think, okay, what can we actually? This is what I love about moments like today when we're focused on one thing. What actual effectual changes can we make? And I think it's great that we've got, like you just speaking upon it, just knowing those places, like Missy was just saying, that when you're in that moment, you can just reach out to people, and there's places like the Imaginarium, and hey, there are other places like this. So it's times of, and maybe I can throw this over to you, Nikki, because it's something we kind of discussed, and we kind of we kind of got into it roughly. But what kind of advice do you have, and how do you look at this situation? How do you look at the riddle of of herding individualistic creative people and trying to get in order to connect? And because I said to you before, if we could just get 10% of us to connect, we could literally change a great deal in this world. But we all, like I say, we just scatter like cats. So I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think that people often think that when they do something, that requires meditation, whether it's on a collaborative scale, like the 24-hour Imaginarium, they think immediately that they've got to do something selfless, like world peace. I'll just say that as a really stereotypical thing. That's something like, I want to wish for world peace, and yeah, let's all meditate on that, which is a great thing. But as you said, Tim, we're all very individualistic people. We have different, everybody has different wants and different desires and different wishes, and in terms of how they may like to improve their life on an individual basis, or, how they perceive the world at large, what they perceive as their external reality, what people consider to be a positive thing or a negative thing can vary massively. What we as individuals view as something as very negative, another person wouldn't give it a second thought. It's quite hard to conceive of how people perceive things so differently, because you sort of have the argument, well, if we're both standing and looking at the same thing, then we're going to perceive it in the same way. But that's so kind of far from the truth, in the sense that people have such different perceptions. So in terms of some kind of collaborative shift in consciousness, like a collective consciousness change, my advice would be to do the thing that gives you the most joy on an individual basis, because it's not necessarily a bad thing if you say, well, there's a few minor things that I want to change in my life. I'm not really sure about the world at large, because I don't really, this might be, this is just an example. Somebody might be thinking, I can't really think about the broader grand plan of how this affects other people. I can only think about how it affects me at this moment in time. Now, that kind of sounds like a almost negative, counterproductive thing. But if people do the things that bring them the most joy, if they put themselves in a state of joy and bliss, as long as they're not intent, their intent isn't to harm another person or cause injury, that would be a whole nother story, and that would be a whole nother show. We could discuss all of that stuff. But as long as they are creating a sense of joy, a feeling within them that is good and positive, they will then connect with other consciousness, in that sort of sea of mind, that flow of the mind consciousness. They'll connect with others. And then what we'll start to see is a collective reality play out that is reflective of that joy, that feeling state of joy. And in order to be in a feeling state of joy, you have to put yourself in a higher vibratory state of awareness. And higher vibrations transcend fear, or anything that's connected to fear, or anything negative. So what I'm saying is, if people put themselves in a higher state of vibration, so therefore they transcend the fear or any of the negative emotions, which can only exist within the lower fields, then the reality that we see collectively will only be one that is of a higher vibration. So nothing negative can exist there, because it's like, I always use this analogy, but it's like the radio station where, sorry about that, there is like two different frequencies, you know, like say you've got radio Bristol and then you've got radio 4 or something, and the two can't exist within the same frequency wave band. You know, if you're tuned into radio 4, you can't be tuned into another radio station. And it's the same with the lower levels of vibration that are only generated, the negative things that we see that are generated from lower levels of vibration, which are fear, hatred, anger, jealousy, you know, all these negative emotions that put us in a lower level of vibration. We then connect with other negative things, and then we start to see this collective reality of negativity play out, because we're succumbing to the fear. So it's like, if we can put ourselves in that higher vibration by doing something we love, which seems really selfish, it's like, well, that's not really very good, is it, when there's all this stuff going on in the world, and you know, I should be thinking about world peace or something on a collective level. And you can do that as well. You know, if you're going into a state of meditation, that's what you want to think about, and you're conscious of what you're doing, that's just as good. But if you're somebody that doesn't really know what to do, and you're thinking, well, I don't know what the best thing is for everybody, because everybody wants different things. You know, if you say, well, I would like to improve my life a little bit, it might just be that you want more friends in your life. You might be quite a lonely person. You might think, I just want more friends, but I'm a bit shy and I can't really talk. I don't ever seem to meet people. I'm never in a position anywhere where I can meet people, and I don't really go on the internet or whatever. You might be wishing for that. So your intent is that you want more friends, using this as another example. So what you could do to get yourself in alignment with what you're intending to bring into your reality is you do something that raises your vibratory energy that you are generating, that you're projecting. So it could be that you listen to some music that puts you in this state of bliss, this blissful feeling. Could even bring you to the point of being emotional, because it's just such an amazing piece of music. It could be that you watch somebody that you find really funny. It could be a famous comedian that makes you laugh. So you could be watching that. Or you could be doing something that involves being outside in nature, because that might be something that makes you feel blissful. So the idea is you do that. That's the activity that you're doing whilst you're having these thoughts. So you actually set about thinking the things that you want to change. And if you chose the music, you put the music on, you get yourself into that higher vibrational state. Then meditate on, which is a thought process. That's what the meditation is, thinking about what you want to bring into your reality. And I think if every individual person did that, and they didn't overcomplicate it too much or feel guilty about wanting something for themselves, the fact they're putting themselves in a higher state of vibration, that will travel like a wave, a frequency wave, and it will connect with the other higher vibrations. And eventually what will happen is we will see a collective reality play out that is reflective of that on a collective level. So that's kind of what I would say.
Nikki, I mean, as usual, I mean, that's the drop the mic moment, mate. I can't say any more. That was perfectly said. I couldn't. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, honestly, if anyone, Missy or Sasori, do you have anything to add to that? Because I think that's just, you perfectly said it. So
yeah, I got a couple stuff to add to that. So what we're talking about too, and what I think about a lot, is a systems way of thinking. And earlier I was talking about the ecology of ideas. And what I'm most concerned about is, in order for us to start creating these better ideas in a more sustainable, organic, healthy way, in the light, for a better lack of a better word, we need an environment for this. And the environment could be really easy. Everybody has their Imaginarium, and we use it all the time, whether we realize it or not. It's like what I said. If you have work today, just take a longer lunch. Take a half day, call in sick or whatever. It's just I'm kind of coining it, or just in my own mind, and not necessarily saying it, but it's clicking in my own mind. This is like a creative mind's holiday, and so, but where the thing is, we're not necessarily praising creativity. More so that we're going for the actual physical experience of creating. And right now we're in the kind of just announcing phase, so we're not actually doing that. Like I was doing a lot of Imaginarium before the Imaginarium, and I think most of us here live in the Imaginarium all the time. And that's why we're part of the Infinite Imaginarium. And so, but the 24 hours is for anybody, you know, like just to be more cognitive of that you're doing this anyways, that we could do it in probably a more productive way. We could do it in a more fun way. We could do it in a more effective way. And basically that's what I like to think about for the Imaginarium. And hopefully down the road, we do something with our subdomain on Minds, and that it's this kind of functioning creative tool app where you could make decisions, you could get funding, you could have someone that like an app that does the books for you. So it's just a way to offset middleman, to actually take out the middleman. And so you have these apps, and the collective does it organically. So you don't have middlemen, and then so you're able to have an environment to make the content that you want to make, whatever it is. And then so once you have that seed, then later, you know, however you choose to use it. But it starts from a good environment. It's not in the environment where it has to be popular for it because you have like money tied to you. So instead of just expressing yourself, you're looking to make money. That's why I said art and media for inspiration, transformation, and manifestation, and not for entertainment, corporations, and monetization. So that's like the last thing you probably think about. But the first thing you think about is what inspires me, what I want to inspire other people. Okay, how does it transform me, and how can it transform other people? And then manifesting it. And the manifesting part is pretty hard. But I think we'll just naturally, organically get there, and we'll get there faster with more people. The more energy you put into it, the more you get out. The more you even start thinking about ideas, the more synchronicities you see. Magically, some book or some post or some video will really speak to you. They'll echo in the back of your consciousness, and you think, why am I like thinking this idea? Why is this symbol or archetype playing itself out in my waking life? But it's probably literally happening in your dreams. For anybody that pays attention to the dreams, you'll definitely see the different underlinings there. But I mean, it's just happening naturally, and if you think of it more in a Taoist way of going with the natural flow or the rhythms of things, and everybody has their own little thing about it, and it kind of goes into this chaos mathematics, and what they're learning about swarms. It looks all chaotic from whatever your viewpoint is, but from an outer, more systems view, there's an elegant dance. And one of the best phrases I've ever heard of like a physicist say is that it's looking like consciousness is more than computation. It's looking like consciousness is more like music. It's more like a song. And so when you think in that, well, coupling with what Nikki's saying, so I think that what we could do, the potential that we have individually is the mirror image and the fractal nature of what we have collectively. And that we're at this point where we have enough tools to do what we need to do. Now we need to go about doing it. And I think the more we share that and the more we do it individually and collectively, the easier it gets, the more momentum we get, and it just will happen. And this is what I like to say. This is evolution, not revolution. Revolution is a revolving cycle. I don't want a revolving cycle. I want evolution. I want to grow to a new cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we were talking about blockchain stuff, when I was in the scenario talks and changing the thing, Douglas Rushkoff said this really important thing. It's like more important than building a new app or blockchain is the onboarding process. Is that these people are going to use your music, your app, or whatever, but the onboarding process is their own mindset that they bring to it. So how can we simultaneously get attention, but also sustain a better, we used to say comment culture, but this is more content culture, where the content is saying something deep and having it as a dope ass beat. The dope ass beat is how you get attention, but say something deep so it resonates and it has potential to be infinite. And it's just a different ecology of ideas. And I think what the old system has is they looked at it like a stock market. They look like it in a closed system. They're not looking at it from our point of view. And this is a lot longer game, but I think we could already do it in this small pocket. There's niches, right? And this niche is here. Now, you're gonna have to do it bare bones. And I used to say, I used this earlier. In a lot of ways, it's not gonna be better than this. This grit, the grind, the pain, the struggle, the bliss. In a lot of ways, it's not gonna be better than this, because that's that journey that everybody can relate to the struggle, whether you succeed or not. Everybody could relate to that part of the story, and that's why a lot of that is a lot truer and better. But hopefully, we could soften the blows with Infinite Imaginarium. That's why I think Luminous Dark Tales and even The Light in the Dark and even Dark Night of the Soul, that's why those things I think have done the best as far as content that we've been thinking about developing or thinking of doing. And even at that, I know for sure that Infinite Imaginarium is happening everywhere, even though not everybody thinks of Infinite Imaginarium the same way I think of it. And I think as we move forward, it's going to be really interesting when there's more ideas in the ecology of the ideas and how they bounce and morph and mutate. So I think part of making the environment is the soil, and that's the funding, which hopefully Open Collective is the answer to that. And it's in an open, transparent way, and it's made by group decisions. We use this thing called Lumio, which you vote. Hopefully we could package that all into one thing. I think that would be the best option. And I know it's possible on Minds because it's because it's open source. So we could do whatever we want with our subdomain on Minds. And we plan to do that. But we're just in the early phases of that.
But generally, storyline, I think this is, we've gone back right to where we started this whole conversation, this whole point, because I think you just back to the very thing. It's that moment when, as you said, we all create something, and I think it is worth remembering for all the truth we've spoken about. As you said, that that dope beats, deep thing, man, it's been true, and that's the common thing we've discussed about tonight. And I think the thing I just wanted to just generally add on to this, and I think it's it's been a deliberate policy of mine not to talk publicly about it, but I just wanted, while we're in this conversation, there are other platforms. There are things that are coming, dude. What I'm doing in 99 and stuff like this, and I think where we are right now, and I think it's one of the things I wanted to kind of bring to this conversation, is that I think like never before, with all the things that we discussed and all the different areas, I do think there's. I said to you before we went live, I think this is we're a tipping point, and this is the thing about like you were speaking upon earlier on, Nikki, what you were saying earlier on, Missy, and what you were saying, Satori. It's all about the coming from that individual point of view, and when it happens, things just spring up. We've seen this with everything, every piece of. That's why I've said before. There is nothing original really, because electricity doesn't just come from one person. It came up all over. It sprang up. This is what you were alluding to, Nikki, about that unconscious that unconscious thing that's just sitting out in the universe. But this is the great thing right now. So I say we're at this tipping point, because I do enough of these Life is People to know, and I know you do, Satori. I know we all got our own little networks. We all know there's things coming, and I think one of the things that's really, I don't know, it really is kind of inspired me a lot, and I think really more than any time ever before, as much as we seem to be, and it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, we seem to be fed by this constant negative about we're in doomtastic times, and hey, that's objectively you could argue it's maybe humans just getting to that point where we are just going.
Yeah, there's so many critics in the world. Rather, the world doesn't need more critics. Rather, it needs more visions and more different types of visions. Being a critic, it's crowded trade, as they say. There's no good niches for someone that wants to start something different and be creative. All the good ideas are in visions, different ways. And so what I remember when we first started to frame Infinite Imaginarium, and so it was kind of like this thing that there's this new world, whether it's the blockchain or decentralized world coming up, where anything is possible and we could do anything. And there's always this different idea of that, right? But what I wanted to pose with Infinite Imaginarium is that, okay, let's start already living in that world. Like, let's don't talk about it anymore. Let's like literally do it. So I've been looking for different apps that help me in just the general principle of it, that they're being open source and transparent, so that you just know what's going on. And that in itself is a evolution where, and so if you look at it's Kuhn's Progress of Science Development. Anyways, so there's point of this new story of humanity, and people are writing it right now, right? Creating it right now as the blueprint of hopefully how we use the internet. And the internet is like this massive symbol of the whole collective conscious and the cosmic consciousness and all these archetypes and whatever they are. And that's what it kind of represents, because it's like this physical manifestation of it that's happening right now. And if we could keep it open, then we are able to have environments where different ecologies spring up of creativity or whatever it is, and to sustain themselves. But I said, with Infinite Imaginarium, let's already live there, because there's enough tools out there to do it. And it's more of how you are. So protest as a way of being. And so your whole being is that protest. Your whole being is the way you want to be. And hopefully we could keep on having an environment where that's possible, and that it gets its own momentum, and it becomes its own thing, and that it's there. And so for us pioneers that are out there trying to do something different and know that it's possible because we've seen the future in a vision, whether it's hearing it in a podcast, whether it's in your own mind, or the aha moment. That's what Satori means. Satori means a sudden enlightenment, sudden illumination, the luminous dark, that moment where you figure out, oh shit, this is why I was born. This is what I was supposed to do. And then so that's where we're trying to help integrate that stuff. So that's where you're being that being. And so and it's important to have that support, because I think that's where we fail, because we don't have the right environment for right ideas to grow. And I think that we could help facilitate that in a very productive way with using tools on the internet. And I'm hoping to be more of an example of that, and then that we could do that. And so next year from now, we're not necessarily talking about Infinite Imaginarium. We're talking about projects that we're doing with Infinite Imaginarium. Not as Infinite Imaginarium as a concept, but Infinite Imaginarium as the way we're interacting and being. And so, like, I'll be, for instance, recently I've been doing these poetic session mixes things that I've done, and I've been really liking that. And so there's always this great saying that if more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I'm convinced the world would be a lot better place. JFK, and it's true because what we was talking about was that it goes beyond party lines. Poetry goes to what you think at night, what you really think, and sharing the private public and doing it in a safe way. And I think that's why we invented art, that we could really say what we want to say and have this mask or this buffer for it, so that we still shield the real us, which is important. That's why it resonates with other people. But I think um, we're just not at that point yet environmentally. I'm talking about this weird uh, virtual thing, but it's not virtual in like digital technology. I'm talking about like invisible thing, I guess, and it's a lot more ethereal, I guess, of this ideas as this weird motion of movement, I guess, and how things get created on the systems level. Because whether we do it or not, it's gonna happen and will happen and does happen. Like it's something as the same as the sun and the moon are gonna keep on turning, whether I'm here or not, or whether I do a podcast or not, whether I do a video or not. So I want to give people just a spark in whatever I do, to have them maybe think of something differently or to do. But it's not only that. Infinite Imaginarium is an invitement to play as well. So it's like, oh, here's my story, but it's always followed up with, what's yours? What's your Imaginarium? What is it that keeps you haunted at night? What's that moves you through the day? Whatever it is, everybody has it, and hopefully, like, we could get more. Because I think the real experience for the 24-hour Imaginarium is being in that flow of creativity. That's what it is. It's not posting anything. It's not even talking about anything. It's like being there. But also, too, there's the fractal nature of it. When you do it collectively, it does it in a lot slower and chaotic pattern, where you get those synchronicities where things just start to click, and it goes without you doing it or not doing it. It happens on its own accord. I like when things fall together like that. I think the better we do our environment, the more that could happen. And I think that's following your path with bliss, as Joseph Campbell will say, and that we could do a lot better job than we're doing right now. And it just simply getting in tune with what's going on right now, getting in tune with what's going on with yourself, and going through the grit and the grind.
Yeah, you seem to have broken up there, Satori. I don't know what it's for everyone else, but yeah, I mean,
He disappeared.
they completely disappeared. I mean, before I do sort of wrap this up, because I think one of the things I wanted to, it seems so, honestly, synergistic to what you just said, then, Satori. I think one of the great things about being creative is when you see something you just alluded to, when you see something you created yourself, which goes back to the beginning of this conversation, that the element of creativity is manifesting something yourself. And when you see what that does to somebody else, and I always say the hashtag, creation inspires creation, art inspires music, and it's so there's nothing more pleasurable. And I'll speak upon this, it's the truth. When you have manifested a creation, and whether it's a piece of music or something, and you see somebody else, and you see that seed transform and, like you said, evolve into something else, it's so, I don't know, it's life affirming. It goes back to what you were saying earlier on, Nikki. It's that you just sort of feel like I'm not alone in this universe. There is some sort of connection between us as human beings, and I'm going to play out with. Before I do this, I'm going to maybe ask all, Nikki and Miss, thank you all for coming on, but and I'll ask you for all any sort of parting thoughts or anything you particularly want to say. But I'm going to play out with, and it's got to be sound only, but I will put a link up to where it's on your Minds channel, Satori. But this is something that, well, maybe while I'm queuing it up, it was a track I did called Interstellar Blue, which is a piano sort of project on this sort of this whole thing with tonight. It's like I just do alone on my piano, and you took it away, and again, people can go out and links to it, but even with the order that you'll be able to hear, you made it into something else, and it became something else. So while I'm queuing this up, and again, I want to say thank you to you all. Well, I'll start off with you, Satori. Maybe you sort of give a bit of background to this, this sort of what sort of stemmed it off, and the sort of anything you may want to say about it. And again, to you, Missy, I know we only briefly met, and we're maybe starting to connect in another way. And to you, Nikki, again, and then again, we've always sort of brief, but kind of mind-blowing conversations we have. So I want to thank all three of you. But like I said, I'm going to hand it over to you before and then. Like I say, I want to thank you all for doing it. And like I say, please, all three of you, give places where they can reach out, because I think that's the general. Above all else, I wanted to get from this whole squeeze out of this conversation was the idea, for us to connect at Herding Cats thing, where we can start to, as you were saying earlier on, Missy, those tentacles out into the dark, and know there's people out there. So please shout loud and clear where people can reach out, where they connect, and again, thank you very much, Satori, just for the idea of this, dude, because as I said before, it's been a very, it's the second year we've done this, dude. It's I think there's been a lot of progress since the last year we spoke, and I don't want to talk about it, but there's been so much progress. I know what we're doing in 99. You've spoken so eruditely about what the progress you made with Imaginarium. There's so much progress going on, which again, maybe it's a follow-up conversation, but I just want to say thank you. It's the whole point of what it is. Every little action that you do, when you do put it out into the universe, for want of a better word, it does cause it does cause a reaction. It's the very nature of what it does. You put something out, and the ripple effect, it'll bounce, and it'll come back, and things will evolve. And I think this very conversation and the fact where we are right now is just something it's a very proof of what we talked about, and I think should be inspiring to everybody else. I said too much. I want to thank you all for coming on. And like I say, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll finish that track.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I've been breaking up, but so really, I like to thank you too for everything, because I consider you original member of InfiniteImaginarium when we first started this. So we all carry around the InfiniteImaginarium with us, whether we realize it or not. And I just want to help facilitate that into a higher frequency, in a better environment. And there's a lot more for stuff to do, but we'll have links and all that kind of crap. But anyways, going to what you were saying is what I just want to say about what you're going to play is that it happened synchronistically. Like I saw the post of one of the song, and I was editing audio, and I'm like, oh, these eerily go together, and I kind of just put it together and saw what happened. And those are the best experiences of where you're just the pin, and it's the idea that expressing itself. And so, yeah, that's basically it.
Thanks for having me, guys. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say, sort of as a final thought in a way, that a magnetic universe, like you were saying, Tim, so every tiny little thing can just be something really minor, sparks a reaction. So I would say, if we can educate people using the InfiniteImaginarium to overcome their fear by doing what they love, what brings them the most joy, and bring them to an understanding that when they do that, they will connect with other like-minded beings, that are living and sensing that same joy and that same bliss,
and liberated,
and create this collective environment. And I agree with you, Tim. I think we're at a tipping point where, sort of, if you look at it as 100% thing, there's 50, In fact, I would even say 70% of the people now are tapping into this now and doing it consciously. So we will start to see this reality play out. It's inevitable because it's quantum physics, it's science really. So it's inevitable that will happen. I think a lot of people know this, but they're still succumbing to the fear, and they're kind of thinking, oh, but if I do this, I might look stupid. If I show that portion of myself, what sort of reaction am I going to get? And I think that's the beauty of something like the Infinite Imaginarium, is that it gives people a platform where they can go. They don't have to sort of think, well, where do I share this? Who do I share this with? Because maybe some of my current social circle they've never seen this part of me. They might be thinking they've never seen this. They might be a bit shocked, and I'm a bit worried about showing that part of me. So they can go somewhere where they're going to feel accepted. But ultimately, this thing will grow and expand, and people will just be doing it naturally. It won't be a case of having to overthink anything. It will just be a case of a being state that people will automatically put themselves into, or eventually they will automatically just be in that state. So yeah, I think that's the key, is overcoming the fear, which isn't that hard. It's just putting yourself in another vibratory state where things can't harm you, where the lower vibrations can, all the things associated with the lower vibrations can't harm you. That's probably a better way of explaining it. So I think that would be my final thoughts.
That was a lot of fun, guys. I just wanted to say also, after those moments that I spent in the ER, and I shared with you guys the exit of, oh, wow, listen, play. Oh, they paused it.
It's the opportunity of us actually being able to use our creativity without any bounds. It's where I think the main task of the first story is, how do we make a sustainable ecology slash economy where people get a basic income, so you have the basic needs met, but also to the supplemental part of that is then to how do you keep on providing these people with empowerment of them dreaming up the new model of where we could go as a species, of how we could create equilibrium back into the environment, of how we could solve these social problems, of how we could get past this narrative of us versus you, and all we do, basically what politics is right now, and this is what Robert Anton Wilson said one time, is the basic primate instinct of flinging shit at each other. So basically that's what happened in this election, right? Donald Trump, his insults was his primate instinct of literally throwing shit at somebody. And Hillary will be like, oh yeah, well you're a racist and a bigot. Well, you should go to jail. And this is just them playing on the basis level of a primate for throwing shit. The real creativity or the real task would be, okay, things suck. How do we build a better model? How do we, but also too, at the same time, how do we, like, work doesn't just have to be not fun, it could be also exciting. We could say something deep and still have fun and party. That's why I had in there, every day that you don't dance should be considered a lost day. Like, that if we get so caught up and thinking that everything's so dire or the problems seem too much, and we forget to stop and smell the roses, to stop and laugh and joke or listen to music, and sometimes we think, we feel bad, and this is something Douglas Rushkoff was talking about. We think, oh, if we don't go and save the rainforest or the water, or what's happening in the Middle East or in Africa, people are dying and this and that. and we get burned out because we forget one of the core things about being alive is just stopping and being. As we move forward and we stop being so resistant to certain things, that there's this sublime melancholy thing that happens. There's even, I used to write a lot in my poetry about it was so beautiful that it hurt. And in the opposite too, sometimes something that's kind of hard and painful is beautiful. Like, for instance, I learned this at a very young age because I was lucky enough to have this experience of my great-grandmother. She lived to be 94 or whatever, and she used to live with us part-time. She would like go from here to Oregon, and so I was really close to her, and I remembered the process of her death. And this is something that's supposed to be really sad, and I'm gonna lose my grandma. I think I was about like 10 when we went to the hospital. And every time we went to the hospital, she would make us laugh. She like literally got us kicked out of the hospital because she was making us laugh and said, "Oh." And then when the doctor would come in, she'll fake like, "Oh, I'm tired, I need to sleep," and be like, "You need to let your grandma rest," and this and that. And until they finally literally kicked us out of the hospital. And then as we were getting kicked out, she was like sticking her tongue at us. So, and she was dying, and she was always worried about like us, enjoying that moment. Don't be so distraught about, oh, we're losing you, without missing the moment of savoring every last moment that she's there alive. And I remember when they kind of like said, "Oh, there's nothing else we could do," she's like, "I don't want to stay here and die in the hospital." And then she went to my aunt's house, and we were there, and there was this moment where she kind of like said, "Oh, I'm gonna rest," and she went, and I think I left something on the table, and I went there, and she died, and there was this moment, because how she like prepared us, that even though that moment was intensely sad, but I had this overwhelming sense of beauty that she enjoyed, and made sure that we enjoyed every last moment with her, milked life for all it's worth, and that finally when she left, even though I'm gonna miss her, those feelings and emotions and memories that I have of her still resonate with me right now. And that is beauty. That's the beauty I want to constantly latch onto. And of course, distractions from society, work, drama with friends and family all take me away from that. But that's constantly something I hold deep within me. And that those are the type of things that are real and make everything real. And those are like probably the hardest things to hold on to as we get our attentions distracted by everything. That to simply be able to laugh and be with each other. And I think we could go so far out with this technology that we hopefully come back to ourselves. And that, we find social networking doesn't make us more antisocial, but if we could curve that to making us have these moments of communing with each other and expressing ourselves fully, and doing that in a creative way that sparks ripples of creativity to other people. And if we could just do that with a small fraction of the people, I think that would be a success for Infinite Imaginarium.